Hello and welcome to the episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. Hit me up on Twitter, NJ287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. The website is dsmsports.net, where you can find every episode and more content as well. And of course, this podcast is available on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. Just an excellent show for you guys today. I was so excited to be able to have this conversation. This guest has been on my wish list for years now, ever since I started really tracking the work that he was putting together with Manchester City and with some of the stuff that he did with Hawkeye. My guest on the podcast today is Joe Farren. He is the head of his own consultancy, Future of Sport Co., is helping startups, helping teams, helping leagues make sense of all this emerging technology, good go-to-market strategies. We'll talk more about it in the full interview itself. But if you want to learn about emerging technologies, how to get involved with your team or brand in the gaming space, what it means for fan behavior and how different paradigms are shifting, and what that means for different opportunities to drive revenue and grow fans. Just cannot say enough good stuff about this conversation. So here he is. Stick around. My conversation with Joe Farren of Future Sport Co. Right back on the podcast with today's guest. I'm so excited to be speaking with him. Every time I talk, I get inspired, I get energized, I learn a ton. My guest on the podcast today is Joe Farren. He runs his own consultancy, Future Sport Co., helping startups in the sports world where they go to market, and really it's just so much to drive innovation and new ideas and better ways to monetize and engage fans in the space. Just such a great mind for this stuff, and I'm excited to meet him. So welcome to the podcast today, Joe.
Thanks so much, Neil. Thanks very much for having me. Big fan of the pod and everything you're doing. So I'm really excited to chat.
Hell yeah, we're going to learn so much today. You've done so much good work and continue to really help this space evolve and grow. And before we get to the meat of our discussion, Joe, tell us about you. You have a really cool background and career path, and tell us about all your stops along the way, and certainly what you're doing today at Future Sport Co.
Sure, yeah. So I guess I've sat in a lot of different seats in the sport, media, and tech ecosystem. Started off my career working at the BBC and ITV, cutting my teeth as a budding researcher AP on different sports docs, live sport, entertainment formats. Actually, my last stop in TV, I worked on Love Island
Oh
as
wow.
a casting researcher. So basically finding people for the show. So yeah, a lot of people ask like, how did you go from that to sport? But yeah, it's been a winding road. But essentially, I wanted to leave TV to go more into the tech side of things. Ended up going in-house. Buddy of mine was at Hawkeye Innovations, and they wanted more kind of creative broadcast folk to work, essentially building out new fan engagement products and working with broadcasters and leagues on broadcast enhancements using that data.
Mhm.
So went into Hawkeye for 6 years, where I was essentially across product ownership and BD, helping build out new products with that sports data from ball and player tracking data, live AR products.
Yeah.
Um,
If
with
people are not familiar with Hawkeye, if you ever watch like a major tennis match, and you see like the ball being in or out, like that's probably the most common visibility you'll see with the Hawkeye's technology these days.
Or you have to, when I'm chatting to people in the States, I always like call it chase review because it's like when they refer to it at the US Open, it's always like, oh, let's do the chase review on that one. Like that's where people are like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that thing. So essentially, yeah, Hawkeye works in 25 different sports now. So they do the virtual line to game now. So you've seen that. So like I was really kind of got in at really the big international growth and expansion phase in 2017. And it was just an amazing opportunity to really get like hands-on with creative and emerging tech and really understand how to build out new creative products, use cases and commercial assets for partners. And
Yeah.
then I was in-house at Hawkeye, and this was 2021 at this point, and then it was the whole, as everyone can cast their minds back, the like Web3 blockchain mania. That was the hot thing in sport. And to be fair, and there's still a lot of interesting use cases, but at that time, I think what captured me was the ability to create new media assets, and actually those assets going moving from that passive engagement to that active engagement, like the digital collectibles boom with NBA Top Shots, and that idea that you can actually own media, not just watch it, I think was really interesting and powerful. And I think there's still a lot of really interesting use cases today, but essentially I I ended up being involved with a project with the Australian Open called AO Art Ball, which was the first time that was this digital collectibles project where essentially you bought a piece of digital art called your art ball, and then using Hawkeye data, if the last plot in the last point in the match, if the last ball bounced in your plot, you won extra prizes, extra utility. So
Yeah.
it was a mixture between like a digital art project and a sports like lottery ticket.
Yeah.
And then ended up doing, I think 6 million in primary sales. It
Wow.
had 6,000 users. So I left Hawkeye to then go and work on that project in year two. We ended up scaling up different other fan engagement like features and use cases, sold that project into the USGA to do a similar concept called USGA Art Ball. And that was really the beginning of my, I guess, journey more into like like direct to consumer applications of emerging tech. And then use that as a springboard to go and work as a consultant with various different teams and leagues on commercial innovation strategy. And then my route into working and leading the innovation lab at Man City was essentially I was a consultant working on a digital and physical collectibles project um, with them called using immersive art, which was a Zoom art project where essentially you could create an immersive infinite story using a medium called Zoom art. So work with a buddy of mine, Greg, to bring that to market as a co-licensed product with Man City, and then off the back of that, there was a role that opened up leading the what was called the Metaverse team at the time, but is now called City Fan Labs.
Hmm.
Essentially leading that whole innovation unit at Man City, and applied and ended up getting the role, which was yeah an amazing journey, amazing opportunity. And then I've since left Man City, moved across to the States to be closer to my wife's family, who's over here, and now started my own consultancy called Future Sport Co. And we help best in class startups go to market with the biggest and best rights holders and brands.
Love it. That's such a, I mean, cool story. I can't wait to dive all into it. And I mean, to your like, the ways that sports teams and organizations and properties and media can engage fans is changing and evolving so rapidly. And this new generation of fans wants to be participatory engagement. It's not just a one to many broadcast. It's personalized. It's participating, and it's so much good stuff that we'll be able to go into today. But I'm curious. Yeah, it's interesting to hear about your time with with City Football with Fan Labs and how you help organizations now kind of penetrate teams, leagues, media properties as well. Like, what are you seeing in terms of how not necessarily org charts, but like in-house expertise is evolving? Like, are most people just relying on let's just talk to someone outside of our company who knows the stuff better than we do, or are they like going to their head of digital and saying, "You figure this out, like you're on top of everything, right?" Or like a CTO even and saying, "Like, what should we know about blockchain?" Or like, who's kind of like leading this innovation in-house right now, or is it really just you seeing a lot of like varied ways to go about it?
I think at the moment you are seeing the like proliferation and the need, I think, of in-house resource specifically focused on innovation. And when I say innovation, I think it's because that everyone has their own day jobs, right? And like whether you're the person in digital or in media, primarily your day job is to like execute on existing opportunities and channels. Whereas I think the need for an innovation lab is really having that dedicated resource that can think about what's coming next and open up new emerging platforms, test and learn with new emerging technologies to create new assets and commercial opportunities as its own business unit. Because ultimately, people just don't have the time and resource to be able to do that out of their day jobs. Now, there's still, I think, only a fraction of teams that really have built out their own internal resource. But I think that's changing. I think everyone is seeing the need to dedicate internal resource, whether that's like a 1 or 2 person team or up to a 5 person team that
Yeah.
we had at City. So I think that is changing. I guess to give in some insight into our kind of strategic direction. I think in sport at the moment you've got a few different functions of an innovation lab. You have a lab that's essentially working as an accelerator, which is almost running vendor selection and procurement for startups, so i.e. pattern matching across business problems internally around how they can go to market and interact with a startup ecosystem to then bring those startups in-house. And essentially they're kind of running the vendor procurement selection process for an accelerator.
Mm.
Quite a few of those innovation units also then have their own venture corporate venture arms where they then invest in
Yeah,
the startups.
sharing the upside.
But I think for sure, but I think one of the biggest gaps at the moment, and I think something we were able to start, the part of the strategy at City was looking at, right, the actual identifying the startup and understanding the problem is kind of just part of the battle, right? Like a lot of any team can reach a startup, any team can open up an accelerator and get, thousands of applications and go and select, three or four startups that have already been like validated in market by other teams and go and easily plug and play them to solve problems. That's fine. But very few, I think, are really looking at how they can build up new revenue streams, new creative assets to upsell to current partners, i.e., drive new incremental sponsorship revenue from existing partners, or actually incubate new emerging tech partners. So, for example, we at City, we did a enterprise deal with YBVR and Meta for a VR content licensing partnership that
Mm.
went live. And then we also were involved in creating and building out Roblox as a new partnership activation channel for the club, to be able to activate new partners and upsell new assets. And I think that at the moment that's the missing link in innovation units. I would shout out. I've seen some really good work recently from the likes of the Spurs innovation team,
Yep.
AI Spurs AI Studio, which think was really interesting in creating a new activation channel using Gen AI, which they upsold to I think Michelob beer.
Yeah.
So I think increasingly you are starting to see innovation units really have that push that more commercial lens versus just a sort of internal accelerator and venture arm, because it'd be good to get your point of view, but ultimately venture is like, one in 10 bet, right? A one
Yeah.
in
Oh,
only
yeah.
one like payoff or outcome. So clubs aren't there's a lot of net meta around, okay, cool, we're gonna start a venture arm, we're gonna monetize like technology, but ultimately like you're not driving short-term revenue directly through a venture arm. So you need to have ways to actually bring these startups in and actually help create new assets, new top line value, new
Yeah.
media to actually drive short-term revenue, because otherwise you've just got this venture arm, which is like, a risky bet. Sometimes you might get that payoff, but you might not. But there's ways you can drive value in the short term for commercial purposes. But it'd be good to
Yeah.
hear your take.
Yeah, and you're certainly helping see the success of a given company that you're incubating or investing in by being one of their clients. Because then you have a case study that, like, oh yeah, look at our case study with Manchester City or with San Antonio Spurs, and that certainly helps them in their marketing. And so it becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy if you have a quality product, of course, and have a successful case study. So that certainly helps. I'm curious in that sense, like too, like you mentioned a lot of times this stuff is trying to see how is this going to help us in the short term to drive revenue? How can we bring in a partner to help underwrite this? Getting our revenue team involved, getting a Michelob Ultra involved with Spurs AI Studio, and is that is that are we short-sighted, or is this the proper way to go about things at times? Because some of this new and emerging technology, it may not be ready for partner integration or direct monetization right away, or maybe that's not even the end goal, the main point. It's fan engagement. It is creating new long-term fans, and we can do something in Roblox, even if we don't have like a direct revenue player sponsor involved potentially, because it's going to help us create fans for the foreseeable future. So is there almost this like balance of, yes, I understand you want to make sure this is like paid for right away, and or is there a little bit of a this is a marketing and a branding and a fan development play as much as it is a partnership and activation play?
Well, I think you've always got to have that long term view and like have done your work on like that the investment can pay off long term into an actual new commercial channel, right? So like for context on City and Roblox, they were one of the first teams to build on the platform in 2022. And like, hats off to my predecessors for essentially investing early and analyzing that platform as a huge growth channel. But it's taken over, the last 4 years of consistently showing up and activating, building an owned and operated experience to actually really be in a position now where they've got the case studies, proof points of actually investing in their own channel first, showing the numbers, building out the audience on that channel, to
Yeah,
then be in a position where they've got the critical mass to now go
yeah.
and look to offer that up as a partner activation channel. So, we got the last activation we did called City Sticker Book Challenge, um, drove 55 million unique players over the course of a 3 month period.
It's incredible.
Um, so it's crazy. Like when we did it, we were and we won I think it got announced a couple of weeks ago. We won a Shorty Award for that. So yeah, super super happy with it. But when we weren't 100% guaranteed that it was like going to be as big as success. But when seeing the numbers and seeing the proof points myself, and even looking at the likes of Tottenham, I think just announced that they're building their owned and operated world on Roblox. I think other teams and leagues and Premier League a few months ago now. I think other teams and leagues are seeing, right, this is a place that isn't just a flash in the pan. It's not like Horizon Metaverse. Like this is a place that is going to have during attention value, and we need to be building our own inventory on the platform.
And something like that too. Like, is it around? Are we following the behavior of our fans? Like, we see more of our fans, especially our younger fans, who are spending time on these platforms, who are starting to engage in this behavior. They're doing this, they're doing that, or is it more of a fan of a new fan development play? Like, hey, there's a lot of people spending a lot of time in here. They're really passionate about stuff. They're fans of something. Can we also make them a fan of our team?
I think it's almost the way, because if you look at some of the case studies and the approaches, right, there's either you show up where your fans already are, you identify those emerging current platforms like Roblox, which 350 million monthly active users, and you build experiences, activations, products on those high volume emerging channels, or you build out net new products and experiences that are potentially drive, which might be slightly higher risk, but equally can maybe drive attention and engagement dwell time into your owned and operated, like AI, like a Spurs AI studio,
Yeah.
or like I think another really great case study from City would be that the AI Kit Creator project, which was a couple of years ago now, but essentially they did an activation with Humor where fans could come in and co-create a new the fourth kit with Humor. So you could go in and prompt a text to 3D model to create your own iterations of the kit. And I think that's a really great example. I think they had, was it 100,000, I think 100,000 entries, 40,000 unique users. And I think that's a great example of showing that you can use emerging tech to actually create a net new experience and drive known fandom, drive value for partners using new experiences. But then you can also have, I guess, a more safer bet, kind of guaranteed attention play by showing up on emerging platforms. So I
Yeah.
think those are the kind of two parallel tracks in terms of how I think about things. And I think it's always got to be, when you're looking at new emerging tech products and activations, you should be looking to think about how that tech or platform can just help enhance or enable existing fan behaviors. For example, like I think why our strategy worked on Roblox so well, which was essentially creating like a Panini sticker book mechanic in Roblox where fans could come in and collect player stickers, collect a row, point stickers mean prizes, is that we were using that mechanic and existing fan behavior of collecting to
Totally.
create a sticky, engaging experience on a high traffic platform. And then on the kind of AI creator type activation, you're using AI tooling to actually just enable fans to come in and co-create with you and the brand. So fans, every fan loves creating their own UGC meme or co-creating with on like socials. But this is creating, I guess, a product and engagement tool that is bringing fans back to your owned and operated. But I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, totally. If you're able to like take, I'm always looking at what are the emerging behaviors that are taking place out there, and what do we learn from those behaviors, and how do we adapt to those or enhance, to your point earlier, enhance what they're currently doing on these platforms, and don't try to force in something that feels foreign to fans or is a, it's the whole I forget what the exact acronym is now. Like, I think it's the Maya principle, like most advanced yet acceptable, right? It's like we want something new and exciting, but also not something so new that it scares us a little bit. And so that's the area you want to play in and gradually get, especially, I mean, I guess I'd be curious to get your thoughts on as well to throw back a little bit is like those, are we going after the fans who are younger by default because they are more anxious to, or not anxious, but more open to trying new things and trying new behaviors, or ultimately, like, is the best thing to try to do something that's more broad that your 50 plus year old fans can also enjoy, even though they may not be on Roblox? Like, so how do you like, are ultimately, is a lot of this emerging technology looking at the under 40 audience? I'm putting under 40 so that I'm in it as well. Like, or are we better off trying to, ultimately, are we going for things that are going to affect the widest reach possible, I guess?
Um, First of all, you're not old. You're not old now. You're still. I think what they'd call you a geriatric. No, not quite a geriatric millennial,
I'm a
but
middle of the road millennial. I'm in there.
but I think my personally my thesis has always been that ultimately the hardest to reach segment in sports is the Gen Z, Gen Alpha,
Mm.
younger millennial audience. Not to exclude you, but that's the audience that essentially is going to be the lifeblood of your property in the next 10, 20 years. And ultimately, I think that's that stat around sports fandoms inculcated at the age, I think between the ages of 8 and 14, right? Like, you decide your teams and it's pretty much set, like it's set for life. So like, ultimately, in terms of do now opportunities for sports teams and rights holders, it's got to be aimed at, say, products and experiences, platforms to onboard and engage those audiences in terms of things you need to do now. Because ultimately, like, you can't be all things to all people, right? An experience that like a 50-year-old fan who's based in Manchester and goes to every game isn't like an AI created tool. They're probably not good. Chances are they're probably not going to be engaged in that type of way. They're going to
Right.
be actually like, oh, I hate AI. They're kind of they're anything like my dad. They're like technophobic. They can barely use maybe barely use their smartphone. So ultimately, you're not going to try and engage them with sort of an emerging tech or interesting bells and whistles like new product because they're
Yeah.
probably not going to be interested in it. So ultimately, you have to understand the preferences, behaviors, insights of your audience, and then build products, experiences, and activations that really
Yeah,
engage
and that's
an
who the
audience.
consumer brands are usually after as well. Like, if you're trying to monetize it with sponsors, those sponsors are usually more attracted to those younger audience as well, who are trying to grow their brand affinity before people have their lifelong brand affinities.
Yeah, exactly. And I think actually it seems like a lot of work. You call that a brand like Michelob actually in the States. It seems like, they're trying to, who are a major sports sports sponsor, right? I think their traditional perception and audience has been very kind of like more older, kind of Midwestern dad who drinks the beer. So they've spent a lot of time investing in inventory and activations that are trying to really reach and activate a new younger audience, right? Like the
Yeah,
Spurs AI piece is one of it, but then also they did a really interesting um, experiential activation where they almost recreated, I think it was recreating a famous hockey match using creative tech, using like holograms, and it was like a one-off
yeah,
experience. I think that's an example of like a brand that's really trying to use emerging tech and new and innovative tactics and activation strategies to try and engage that like next gen fan using emerging tech.
Yeah. I'd love to double tap on that actually. Double click, double tap. I don't even know. Around the whole like novelty versus lasting platform, or however you want to put it. Like I tried the Spurs AI Michelob Ultra activation, and did my I think it was for the tunnel fit arrivals like kind of recreation, and I was like, oh, that was cool. And then I never did it again. I didn't touch it again. It was a like whatever 3 minute experience, and maybe I shared it to some like to a buddy, and I was like, that was cool. So like, how do you weigh these like novelty one-off experiences that I did it, that's cool, and maybe that's the whole point. Like they got it, they got me, I got exposed to Michelob Ultra. Maybe there's some elements as well where they can capture data in that 30 90 second experience versus something like a Roblox that maybe I'm going back to over the course of several weeks, several months, several years even. So is there I'm sure there's value in both the one-off novelty, I'm never going to touch this again, but it's cool, versus something that has, something that you can, have, I guess, be getting value out of over the course of several months.
Yeah, I think I think there's got to be a bit of a portfolio approach to both, right? Like kind of
Yeah,
one off. I think the thing I always keep coming back to is that attention is so ephemeral, right? Like it's so hard. I think it is really hard to drive always on engagement in anything these days because like trends change, habits change. Like I think even in what you're seeing on Roblox now is that a lot of clubs are sort of straying away from investing in always on
totally.
experiences because
Because
it's
you have
so
to keep
hard
updating it.
because the like platform meta and like the habits of like what games people are playing like changing so often. So trying to build a game and expect people are going to come to it for like 2 years isn't necessarily a smart strategy. Then maybe be taking like a more kind of activation tempo led approach, right? But I think there are ways in which you could build mechanics to build up in like enduring, like repeatable attention and engagement. Like for example, that AI the AI creator tool that Spurs did, that was obviously an activation, a one-off activation, but there's probably mechanics you could build in to like actually ensure that it could be season long, right? Like, is it like a leaderboard or a way in which it's like you're sharing in a remix highlight every week, and then you're putting, you're putting yourself in the highlight, or you're doing some kind of form of remixing using kind of creative hooks that's actually built around match day or um a monthly touch point, and then it's maybe integrated directly into
Yeah,
your app to drive intention, engagement, dwell time, and repeatability. So I do think it's kind of like you've got to take a bit of a dual approach to that because yeah, you can't drive everything all at once.
totally. No, I want to step back slightly as well to that the revenue element, the partnership element, and maybe if I give my data, then the partner got what they wanted essentially almost. And I got exposed to their brand, and I'm in their database, so to some extent they can remarket to me and see if there's any brand lift or sales lift, whatever it might be. But I wanted to sort of touch on, especially given your work with startups and on the team side and league side and media side as well, around like how these monetization mechanics come into play. Like are startups now expected to sort of come in and with a plan and help the teams and leagues, whoever they're working with, say, oh yeah, here's like almost like a pitch deck or a playbook about how you're going to monetize this asset. Here's how much you can charge for it, even, or what we recommend, or are they looking at like saying, here's a really cool thing that's going to engage fans, and then let your in-house revenue team figure out what the best way is to integrate a sponsor or to package a sponsor. Like, how are you seeing that approach, and how would you even counsel like startups that you're working with around like, no, you need to make sure that like there's a clear path to partner activation or to monetization here, versus the whole like give them cool shit and let them figure out the best way to monetize it and fit into their current activation elements.
I mean, I do think there's I guess two answers to that question because some startups might solely be maybe addressing a problem of okay,
A pain point.
how can we cut the bottom line cost? So say like um an internal AI tool that helps like with internal systems and processes. But there might also be a startup that's actually helping drive top level growth, i.e., like a new activation channel, new media asset. But I think the holy grail is positioning a solution or finding a way to build out a feature set where you're able to do both, right? You're able to help
Yeah.
maybe cut costs and drive new media assets. But I think if you're more on the fan engagement layer of the house, i.e., kind of more about that fan experience level startup, I think it's super important that it's very clear from the off what asset you're able to create beyond that the club doesn't have currently and can't do themselves.
Yeah.
And what's the proof point that people are actually using or engaging in this new medium or asset? Like, where's the actual proof? Because people can do you're able to get a POC, but ultimately no one's going to necessarily pay you a fee, even it's backed by a sponsor, if you don't have those early runs on the board, even if it means going in essentially providing your service for free for however many months to really help have that data behind you.
Yeah.
Everyone's asking for proof points these days.
Totally. No, you have to be able to either help cut costs or drive revenue or both. Both is certainly the ideal. I love to touch on this show as well, like especially like looking at your background and having the experience of coming up with Hawkeye, and I don't know how it kind of started to hit the industry, but there was something along the way, and I even started to notice early on in my career as well when I was helping with data strategy and data warehousing and looking at well the team operation side of the house is also using a lot of big data, and when we're vetting vendors, like is there something that's going to help like both sides of like okay they're gonna like use whatever they're using Catapult or or Genius or name your favorite data provider, and then they're creating this data that's ultimately to help us drive team performance and recovery and all that. But then also all of a sudden there's this light bulb that goes off of like, hey, like all that data and that that wearables data is really freaking cool. Like we can do something with it to help with broadcast or fan engagement or whatever it might be. And I think Hawkeye is a good example of that. I think Catapult's a good example of that as well. Of like we have all this data of like where players are at any given time, and that's really good for analysis of how we can improve our play and improve our outcomes. But it's also really cool about how we can enhance the broadcast and do fan engagement and drive new partner activation assets. And so like how did that start? Like when did that start to sort of hit you or hit the industry from your perspective? And how did you start to think about it from like a this is kosher. We can monetize this wearables data, and this is how we're gonna do it, or even just getting both sides of those houses, the sides of the house to talk a little bit of like, this is your data, wearables data, really cool. Keep doing it. Like, let's make sure we prevent injuries. And on the revenue side of the house, fan engagement side of the house, for even broadcasters, look at all the cool shit we can do with this data now.
Um, I do think it comes back to, well, I think one, we're only it's still very early in terms of like a lot of the use case development with some of the sports data, right? Like I think it started off primarily from if you look at Hawkeye from a Hawkeye example, like it started off mainly being officiating and
Yeah,
player performance, but now I think we're really starting to see the media and fan engagement and broadcast layer really build out in terms of how that data can segment to create new commercial broadcast sponsor fan engagement assets. And I think it really does. And this is again, I think is why having a in-house internal innovation expertise and unit really does help with that building pattern matching the technology to all the different use cases internally because one say your performance side of the house someone might engage with a startup and they might say, okay, great, these guys can help us with improving player performance. But that one startup, there might also be many, many other use cases that might not be necessarily obvious in the first instance, but become kind of come to light as you're kind of testing and learning with the technology and integrating it. But I do think you really need that internal resource really helps pattern match um, across the different departments to really help build out very like one-to-many assets and use cases of that startup, right? Because I think without that, I do think there's a lot of like lost and trapped value and inefficiency in orgs because of silos. So I do think that kind of internal innovation lab or unit really does help to solve for that.
Yeah, no, and we've seen it start to play out. Like it's really cool to see like whether it's the the Toy Story type broadcast that they're using this data to recreate things in reality, or what the Australian Open did a couple years ago on YouTube with those recreations, just using that tracking data. It's really cool, and it's certainly something to continue to think about of how you can sort of double dip with some of these platforms out there, and both from a I'm sure from the starter perspective as well, to think that they can think through like, hey, this is helping on the team side, but can also be selling to the fan engagement side as well, and of course to your point in house, whether it's through an innovation lab or at least someone whose job it is to really look at all the technology that you have at your disposal, all the data you have at your disposal, and think like, is there another way that we can use this? And you're starting to see that. I mean, Kalshi and Polymarket are kind of part of that as well. They're like, we can use some of this data to create new ways to predict things, like how far is someone going to run in a given football game, for example, or whatever. And that plays to both sides, and it plays in the broadcast as well. So I mean, it's a fascinating space to watch. And I mean, you sit right in the middle of it, and you helped really grow it as well through your time at City and Hawkeye.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, the prediction market one's interesting because, say, I mean, everyone does dismiss it as, okay, it's just betting. But it does seem like when you dive in deeper, there could be a lot of other use cases, right? Especially on the kind of data and predictive analytics side of things, especially around like, audience behavior, sentiment analysis, right? So I do think that's a pretty good like live example of like, okay, everyone's thinking it's just speculation. It's just ultimately a sponsorship check where we, essentially are using our platform to monetize it and sell into fans. But actually, what if there potentially are quite a few other emerging use cases of that data and analysis beyond just like a direct to consumer product that you're essentially just marketing your fans in exchange for a paycheck.
Right. No, it's really fascinating to be able to watch it all play out, and like I want to also spend a little bit of time, and we a few minutes left here with Joe Farren of Future Sport Co. Just really enjoying just picking his brain, learning all this cool shit that you're involved in, and I want to touch briefly on just what we're seeing in the World Cup right now, and the different technologies that you and I were shooting the shit a little bit about before we started recording around some of the cool stuff that we've been seeing come out through this World Cup, and using some of that data that we're getting from player tracking, different ways to engage fans. It's a truly global event. And I guess we can look at this from a number of angles. First, I mean, open field, open slate for whatever is sort of catching your eye right now. But I'm also curious to think about like as with it being such a global event of how you start to see different, not necessarily fan bases, but different parts of the world and how they are thinking about fan engagement, how fans are engaging with those sports, are like especially being at a global place like Man City was like was it mostly a Western world like United States and Europe who were engaging in these new and innovative things, or were fans in India, China, Japan, Africa, etc. also really into it. So open slate. I'm gonna stop rambling because I just want to get your perspective on this stuff because there's so much interesting stuff happening right now in one of the biggest events in the world.
Yeah, so I think I think there's a lot of things I'd call out that I've been tracking the World Cup. I do think, and I know it's very de rigueur to slate FIFA, in terms of they don't have not got the best PR reputation at the moment, but
To say the least.
I do think what they're doing on the gaming side of things is super interesting. I know it's kind of obviously people in the industry will attract that they gave up their exclusive relationship with EA a few years ago. So I do think what the gaming team have been doing in terms of building out a more portfolio approach, as they would call it, to essentially licensing deals with various different gaming providers and platforms to segment their audience and segment and engage their audience via gaming style intent, style of play, geographic locale, and distribution channel, I think is really seems super smart. Whether or not they will end up like being able to recoup the money that all the money they were getting from EA, I think remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But I do think from a global fan engagement perspective, actually have that as a really coherent and risk kind of risk spreading strategy I think is really smart. And I wonder if we'll end up seeing more teams dive further into gaming from a activation point of view, but B also kind of look at that non-exclusive model for building fandom, still driving direct revenue via licensing, but also equally not just putting all your eggs in one basket with one gaming title or provider. So I think that's been a really interesting to play out at this World Cup. And then two, I think the biggest takeaway for me has been really seeing the development and proliferation of that 3D player tracking data, the use cases we're
Yeah.
seeing segment over a range of different like distribution channels and platforms. But if we look at like, the use cases so far, we've seen, a big leap forward in the fidelity of the Hawkeye semi-automated offside graphics. In terms of those player avatars, it's been like a really good addition. I think seeing that actually when you're seeing the call being made, you're really seeing in minute detail like body positioning, like how close the player was or not to being offside. Whereas before you had these kind of very amorphous kind of blobs in terms of like the avatars, which obviously for a V1 was good, but I think that's been a really cool step forward. But then you're also seeing you're seeing different alt casts across, FIFA using that player tracking data to create a new alt cast format, which is essentially like immersive highlights that they put in on their owned and operated
Yeah.
YouTube channel to market the live action to a new audience, but then also drive awareness of their game FIFA rivals. So they've skinned the live action in the same creative and same layer as the FIFA Rivals game as a way to kind of market FIFA Rivals game, but also tell the story of the existing action in a new way. And I think when I last looked, it's getting 60, 70,000 views on YouTube, which is it's not huge, but it's still it's still not insignificant for a new asset and a new asset on their channels. So that's
Yeah.
been interesting. I think the biggest new emerging use case that I don't think we've seen before with the data that's is being proven out is BBC's 3D tool. Have you seen that? But it's essentially fans during the live action and after can come and basically view the action from any angle, whether that's their like favorite player's POV, so like watching the classic Haaland chase down goal against can't remember who it was now, but where he was essentially just nipped the ball in between the defender and the goalie, and just
Yeah.
completely charged him down, sprinting at him. That one was being like all over social media. So I think it was really interesting to see how I think before you were like seeing, okay, cool, we're creating new media assets and distributing, altcasts, immersive highlights down traditional channels, i.e., well, legacy channels, i.e., social or linear broadcast, which is essentially you're taking this new medium and you're still shoehorning it into an existing form of engagement, i.e., still it's immersive, but it's still passive. Whereas
Yeah.
now this 3D tool is allowing really fans to come in, like control the angle, create their own media, and really leaning into kind of actually the full interactivity of the asset. And then across socials, you're just seeing the numbers are crazy. Like every single clip I'm seeing where fans are co-creating with this 3D tool is doing like 8 million, 12 million on X alone is what I'm seeing in terms of numbers. So I think it's been super interesting to see that tool put in the hands of fans and how that media is being proliferated at scale is crazy to see and
Yeah.
really exciting for the space.
Yeah, I know you read my mind there too around like the co-creation element. I think is so critical to like, maximizing the value of that stuff because I think to some extent and 3D viewing or rather VR I guess has been around for years. I mean you think back to like when next VR is working with the NBA or with Meta to some extent as well. And like I remember vetting VR tools a while back, and 3D is another sort of another version of that, of like these 4D highlights or replays or 360-degree views, and it's very much around like super serving a core fan base that's either really into new technology and or just really wants to be able to see like the nooks and crannies of a play developing. But like to your point, like some of these co-created tools, and as people remix it, you get it in the hands of creators who know how to create cool shit. It can kind of go beyond that super serving or that super fan base, I guess. And so when you think about like the proliferation of these new technologies, like is there a world where like I even think about like, the all cast on like Prime Video for Thursday Night Football for the NFL. They have like those like stat heavy alt casts or the
Yeah.
next level stats, and those are getting very small but very passionate and dedicated audiences. And it's not necessarily growing. Like if those fans weren't watching that, they'd be watching the main broadcast. It's not like you're not bringing in a new NFL audience necessarily. But you're super serving a certain segment of that audience. Similarly, with these like really immersive highlights, like are you bringing in new audience? And maybe you are because it's really so it's just the novelty factor alone gets some people in the door. But it's like, how do we balance around like thinking about okay, let's super serve the shit out of our diehard fans and give them so much immersion that they just love us even more and maybe become more evangelists for us as well, versus like something that maybe it's a novelty factor again, that can help us bring in new fans or do something that's going to reach like how do we think about success of these new more deeper engagement platforms? Like do we have to change the scoreboard a little bit? That's not just about like the biggest number of reach, that time spent, depth of engagement, and making a fan into a more of an avid fan even more is a part of the ROI as well.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at there is around, depth versus breadth, right? And like
Yeah.
you need to have products and experiences that serve both. But I do think where we're netting out with all this with emerging tech is that we're moving beyond a place where, you're just having content. I think there's like the traditional view of like content is one thing, i.e., like a passive experience where you watch a video, to moving towards creating using the emerging tech to create new forms of engagement, lean forward at engagement and interactivity, like whether that is Roblox, where you're actually, it's closer to experiential, like IRL experiential than it is to actual video content because you're fully engaged as your avatar in a virtual world running around. There's like a virtual fan zone, for example, and various different forms of play that's a lot more richer in depth and in dwell time than just a video post where you're scrolling through in 2 seconds,
Right.
which maybe that at top level that might reach millions of people, but comparing that experience, and you need to have both, but comparing that then to say 10, 15 minutes of dwell time on Roblox,
Ooh.
it's a much richer depth of experience and ultimately data that you can get on your fans. And I think it really is about creating these segmented experiences that are tailored to different subsets of your audience. And I think emerging tech is just helping unlock those new experiences at scale for rights holders, whether that is gaming, whether that's gaming, whether that's using emerging AI tools to create these new fan engagement products and surface layers. I think that's where we're heading because it's not just about, okay, we're reaching 500 million on X, but actually we don't know who those people are. Like the
Yeah.
Meta, etc., control and own that data. It's about how can we use these tools and new emerging assets to actually drive more engagement in your owned and operated, yeah, I think that's where we're headed because I think also if you look at AI more broadly, right, we're seeing Gen AI tools are essentially cannibalizing traffic and engagement in your owned and operated as well. I think it's 50%, something like traffic to native sports websites is down 50%. So I think we're going to see that teams and leagues are going to need to be able to deploy these new features and products and experiences to give our fans reason to come to their own and operated. Like it's got to be a distinction between information and experience, and it's around how you can really create these immersive experiences to drive people to engage in your owned and operated, to get them to give up their first party data for to you in exchange for an amazing experience.
Yeah. No, it's such a a pivotal time, and you're really like helping to underscore the urgency almost to some extent of like we have to be so good and so undeniable that fans are willing to leave the TikTok feed for a little bit and come to our own and operate because we're giving them something they can't get elsewhere, and it's just that good, and they'll spend time with us. And then the other thing that I've been thinking about as well, throughout your response is the whole the nature of the evolving scoreboard of what success looks like. And and you're starting to see this in the greater sponsorship world as well. I read a lot about sponsorship ROI and how they think about success of activations, and maybe years ago, and to some extent, for some today, it still is, the vanity metrics of what's our engagement, how much did we reach, what was our earned media value, et cetera, et cetera. But you're starting to get a little more demand for bottom line, like what does it actually do for how do we justify this investment, and how do we drive sales, how do we drive more, user or lead acquisition or lead generation, whatever it might be, or customer acquisition, or drive down our CAC to some extent. And so like it that's sort of that what you alluded to before around the depth of engagement and time spent, that might be more important if someone is spending time creating that fourth jersey with Puma, and they're more likely to purchase a jersey later on, and you can show that versus I'd rather have a fewer number of people spend time with us longer if they're going to convert more than have a billion people spend a few seconds with us and we don't know who they are, let alone they're not as likely to convert as well. And so all this stuff is evolving throughout our eyes, and you're starting to see different needs, different demands for how we think about success and how we think about what we need to be doing with our fans.
For sure. I mean, and I think I do go back to the Roblox point case study because I just do think it's a great example of how you can have both, right? Like you can have those top of fun for an activation, you can have those top of funnel metrics, but you can also drive actual owned audience through that. So, for example, we had, I think there was 500 million earned media impressions, 55 million unique fans, and 12 minutes of engagement time on average in the experience. But then in a 1 day, and this was involvement in what you can do on the platform, you can now drive fans via a loyalty mechanic to your owned and operated. So we did in a 1 day test of that mechanic where essentially we said you could go and claim a Puma kit, fourth kit avatar item by going to and claiming a widget on our loyalty platform. Just through that incentive mechanic alone, we drove 6,000 junior citizens members to our loyalty platform in basically over like a 4 hour period. And that's like tangible, which is crazy, but that's tangible, like really interesting data to a sponsor like Puma, right? Because you've proven that, okay, we've got 6,000 fans under the age of 18, over the age of 13, who have just come in and are interested in collecting a Puma virtual avatar item. Like that data is gold dust to a sponsor. And in one activation, you can still deliver, top of the line engagement and awareness, but also drive actual customer and fan acquisition.
Yeah. I'd love to touch on that. And just a couple minutes left here. I promise we'll get to the shareable stat in just a moment. But I can keep you all day, all night, Joe. Did we overcorrect at some point, or did this whole industry narrative overcorrect when we had like the NFT winter and Dapper Labs and NBA Top Shot kind of went from way up, flying high to way down? Not just crap on NBA Top Shot. Crypto punks. You can go across the board. The values of these NFTs and digital identity, digital collectibles, kind of went from their peak highs to much lower. And I think for a lot of people to say, okay, well, I guess that's the end of that fad. I guess we don't have to care about this anymore. But think about the stories you were just telling, and thinking about like these young people and people in general are still valuing their skins on Fortnite, still valuing digital collectibles, and there's still a need for that. So where are we at as an industry? Like, did we overcorrect a little bit, or just tossing aside, being like, well, digital identity and digital collectibles, digital whatever, XYZ don't matter, but in fact they actually do, and this is a valuable behavior and a valuable insight that we should still be thinking about when it comes to engaging and driving not just new revenue, but more fan engagement as well.
That's a really great point. And I think it comes back to the thing we were chatting about earlier of like, what's the enduring fan behavior that's going to be, you know, ever present and is just core to a fan identity. And what is maybe the buzz and the hype cycle technology? And ultimately, fans are always gonna want to collect stuff. Like I think NFTs as a paradigm, sure, the speculative high value NFTs and digital collectibles. There's I think the biggest mistake we made, and I'll put my hand up and say, maybe we all thought that was symptomatic of something that's going to be lasting fan behavior. Like fans are going to go and want to spend $300 on a digital collectible. Like we thought that was mass consumer and fan behavior that was going to scale up to the extent that we see like fantasy, right? Like for
Yeah.
example, um, Premier League Fantasy, I think it's 18 million monthly active users. I think we thought these paid digital collectible products were gonna kind of be something that was mass fan consumer behavior on that scale. And I think it's still appealing to a certain subset of super fans. And I think even if you look at, free digital collectibles, that's still a really useful engagement mechanic and digital product that I think, McLaren last year, I think were driving like three or 400 fans to collect their digital collectibles each week. That's still a fan behavior that's not going away. It's still
Yeah.
driving relevant engagement value. It's still a really useful part of like a digital product suite and kind of inventory list that a rights holder can use. But I think it goes back to ultimately like collecting is going to be enduring. Like, but can you create a new interesting hook and product and story around it that's going to really engage your fans? Like, I think even and even to use a more recent case study, I think at this World Cup, FIFA have this FIFA ID activation, which is essentially like a digital and physical fan ID where you collect a physical like FIFA ID lanyard, and then that connects to a QR code that gives like personalized product experiences and a personalized e-com store. And Matt Best, who's the innovation lead at FIFA, saying that they've had millions of claims of these like physical and digital collectible items on the ground at the World Cup. So it's like ultimately like different engagement mechanics and tech paradigms will change, but that core fan behavior of collecting will always persist. And I don't think collecting is a fad at all. If anything, it's just proved that it's ephemeral. But tech buzzwords and tech hype cycles will change. Same with AI, right? Like ultimately, people have always loved creating stuff. Like whether that's like pixel art memes or whatever. Like in the early internet, people were creating memes, but AI has just allowed people to essentially proliferate that at the scale of the internet, but then also democratize a lot of these creative tools where before maybe only a 5% subset of people would go in and take the time to use Adobe Creative Studio to create a meme. Now in 2 seconds, you can go in and prompt an LLM to create like a Harlan video.
Right.
So I think it's ultimately just still tapping into like existing fan behavior or fan verbs, like I like to call it. Like is that collecting, creating, competing, like how you can use those tools to tap into those behaviors might change over time, but those enduring behaviors will always stay the same.
This is where I love geeking out way too much on like the behavioral psychology and psychographics and all that of like what's the reason for all this. Like I think early on, and to your point with the speculative bubble of NFTs to some extent, there was a lot of people, and maybe you call them fans, maybe you don't, who were like, I'm gonna make a quick buck. Like look at me, I'm gonna get this top shot of LeBron dunking, and 6 months from now I'm gonna sell it and double my money. And so there was some of that financial element with some of these creator tools like memes. It's like I'm going to whatever, get that dopamine hit of getting a lot of likes, or I'm going to grow my follower base and I'm going to become a creator and ultimately monetize that in some way. And so it's like, and other times it's like, I just want to show I'm the biggest fan. And there's that like that aspect of like, look at me, I am the biggest fan. Or like I just saw, I posted the other day about like WWE is launching a club membership, and they're like, do you want to be a founding member? Then you should join soon, join now. And like, there's no really benefit to being a founding member, but you get to say you're a founding member, and some fans really take pride in that. And so there's always different mechanics, I guess, at play and psychological things at play of what's going to drive this behavior. Is it that fans want to show they're the biggest fan and look at how many games I watch? I got this badge for watching every single match or whatever. Or is it about the monetary element? Like I can invest in this, and if I show my knowledge or show my fandom early on, I can pay off in the future. So there's always different mechanisms, and maybe there's some that stand out to you more that have more lasting power than others. But it's different ways to show that fans ultimately, they want to get something out of this, whether it's, whether they do so intentionally or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's like extreme. Even if you look at that same cohort of fans, right, who are who might have only been extrinsically motivated in the NBA through speculation and buying and flipping or that's maybe not the only way they're engaged, but that's a way they express or engage in the property is through that extrinsic motivation piece. I would wager that a decent percentage of those fans who are maybe now the same fans who are on prediction markets because that's just a part of their behavior and how they exist. They engage in sports fandom, right? Through betting, through like kind of the chance to win or lose on something. Like that is just like an example of how that enduring fan behavior or psychology is probably it's just tapped or augmented through new ways of engaging it through emerging, mechanics and emerging tech, right?
Yeah. The last thing I want to touch on though is the triple stat, Joe, and I mean this is an open book kind of question, but like you are on top of all these new ways that we are engaging fans, new ways that we are monetizing ultimately sports as a whole and sports fandom as a whole, and for so many years and still right now the vast majority of the revenue is coming from media rights deals. I mean, that's where FIFA's making making bank on the World Cup, even though Fox probably underpaid quite a bit. That's a whole other story. But like, do you see these revenue streams becoming? Is there not necessarily artificial ceiling, but are they just ancillary, nice little bonus on top? Or like, will these new ways that fans engage with sport, are these paradigms going to become so dominant or so important that they start to become a more significant part of the revenue pie going forward? Or ultimately, is the live game itself just irreplaceable, and that is where it comes from, and we just have to try to activate within those ecosystems or those paradigms right now? So I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit here, but like, what are you seeing in terms of like what this? Not necessarily the ceiling, but like what the end game is with this. Like, is the way that fans experience sport in the future and the way that we monetize sport in the future going to look drastically different if we look up, 20 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could almost take the view. I mean, my view would be that 3D, the data, right, the underlying data asset of 3D data potentially is going to at some point rival at least be a very significant subset of a revenue line of media rights. Because if you take the view that ultimately like outside of the World Cup, media rights, like outside the big properties, media rights are declining in terms of from a valuation point of view.
Mhm.
Media rights are declining. Audience attention is fragmenting on these new platforms. Therefore, like it's gotta things have to shift in the sense that like TV and media were just an outlet and a distribution channel for sport, but now there's so many other distribution channels and engagement mechanisms that you have to really actually take a more of a portfolio approach to how you're engaging your audience and driving engagement beyond just passive viewing, right? Because the long tail suggests that the youth audience in 5 to 10 years, they're not just going to be watching the linear product. Maybe they're doing multiple things at once, and you have to be and show up in ways in which they're gonna find your brand and find you. And I still think nothing's necessarily wholly proven out yet, but I do think what we're seeing on the 3D data side of things in terms of that one to many asset, I do think that's going to be um, drive significant revenue across various different channels and platforms. So I think it's still early, but I do think you can't be ignoring it at this stage.
It's gonna be so fascinating to watch because it really I think about when I was a kid, I watched sports same way that my dad did. I watched sports same way that his dad did, essentially. And so this is the first really like if you look at like Gen Z, I guess in particular, it's the first generation that really grew up where the second screen viewing was normal. Like it's a part of the paradigm. And so we might think, okay, well, once Gen Z hits their third like late 30s and 40s, they're just gonna want to kick back and sit in front of the TV for 3 hours and watch a game uninterrupted. Like maybe, but maybe not because we don't know. We haven't seen this before, and so anyone's guess is as good as mine. And it's gonna be exciting to see, and you're gonna be on top of it, helping to bring in these new experiences and new ideas. So it's gonna be exciting to watch, man.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
we're gonna have some more fun with Joe in our set pieces segment. The first episode shareable stat coming up right now. Just phenomenal stuff with Joe Farren. I can really geek out with him all day. Every time I talk to him, I come away just learning a lot more, having some great, truly actionable insights and great examples to learn from. But stick around because you're going to definitely want to hear more from Joe in our set pieces segment. So that's coming up. But first, episode's shareable stat. And this episode's shareable stat is a timely one, and it's looking at the World Cup final between Argentina and Spain. And the stat I want to share with you is about college cheese market for this single game alone. There is about $1.6 billion part of the market for who's going to win this game. Compare that to the Super Bowl game on Call Sheet as well. It was about $500 million. So we're looking at over 3x the number. Now, however you look at this, you can look at legal betting handle, of course, the DraftKings and FanDuel. You can look at the entire World Cup as a whole. You can look at the various props that are very popular in the Super Bowl and are certainly popular as well for the World Cup final. But what do you take away from all this? I mean, certainly these prediction markets are, for better or for worse, are here to stay, and they are certainly becoming, just another way to bet on sports. And they're legal in all 50 states as opposed to the DraftKings and FanDuel and other sports books of the world where they're actually sports betting, and so you can't do it in California where I am, for example. But I can certainly go and drop any amount of money I want on taking a side in a Kalshi bet, for lack of a better term, or buying a stock in whichever side I think is going to come through. But what do you make of all this? I mean, certainly it's another entry point for fans to become more invested in sport. The overall thesis, which is mostly borne out by the data, is that if you are engaging in fantasy or in betting or some sort of wagering, that you're gonna watch more, you're gonna watch longer, and you're gonna care more in some different capacity, in some emotional capacity of financial investment in that case. It's also an entry point for more fans to get involved, especially in these big games where you have, the BTS and Madonna and Shakira, the star-packed halftime show, similar to a star-packed halftime show at the Super Bowl, and you can bet on or take sides on how long is the national anthem going to be, what song is going to open the halftime show, all these things that someone does not need to be anything close to a football fan, a soccer fan, to want to put money on. And that gives you another reason to watch and to watch more and to watch with more intent as well. And if that gets you involved in the game, or maybe you do actually take a side for a team or for a prop, and if that gets you more involved and more invested in the game itself, well, that's also a pretty positive thing in creating more fandom and more fan development. And a lot of these things, of course, comes down to around like talking about the game with others. My last podcast with Ben Falenta, we talked about fandom, sports fandom being a conduit to a social network. And a lot of these experiences with a call sheet, for example, is to be able to tell your friend, hey, I have some money on this prop. Let's watch this. Or the next day, say, oh, I was so close to winning this amount of money. If only this had happened or this had happened. And it's a way to really engage your social network, similar to just being a sports fan in general. And so, yes, you get that to some extent with Kalshi, but how can we also take this into the peer-to-peer space, for example? You have more people do a March Madness pool bracket with their friends or their family or their office than doing like the great ESPN one or the CBS Sports one or wherever the big one is. And so, how can we also take this sort of predictive gaming into our social networks, into our fan networks, into other fans in your section, for example, wherever it might be? Are there other ways to make this a more social thing with direct social connection beyond just the incentive to win a few bucks and have a story to tell? There's a lot to really consider here and think about here as this prediction market space continues to evolve and grow and become a bigger and more just undeniable part of the sports fan experience and the sports business complex in general. But that's a shareable stat. We can talk on and on about it. Hope you talk about it and think about it and ponder it. Again, that's 1.6 billion. It's probably growing as well. For a bet on the call sheet, who's going to win this World Cup final match between Spain and Argentina. But that'll do it for this shareable stat. Stick around though, because more good stuff coming with Joe Farren of Future Sport Co. You just saw me talk about this episode of Shareable Stat. Now I'm joined once again by Joe Farren. He is the head of his consultancy, Future Sport Co., helping out just as we talked about, helping with go to market and helping bring in new technologies, helping teams, leagues, media, everything under the sun, monetize new technologies and bring them to market and bring fans involved as well. I learned so much, so enjoyed our conversation, Joe. Are you now ready to fire up some set pieces?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's see if you can curl in like Messi or like Malik Tillman if we're a USA fan. Uh, number one,
Depending on Beckham.
there we go. Hell, that's the OG. And besides, if you look up these days, Dave Beckham is on every single commercial and is in the stands every game. He is unavoidable.
Some would say oversaturated, but
Number one, I'm really curious about because I don't know about like what the university experience is like outside of the States. So tell me, you went to university out in the UK. So tell me like what is the university experience like at at Sussex where you went? Like is there like a lot of parties? Is there intramural sports and is university sports in the UK even a thing? Like it's such a big business out here in the States, of course.
I'd say it's a completely different experience, the college environment and the college sport environment in the UK. I mean, yeah, coming out here it's been, I mean, obviously I knew, the top level stats around, college sport as a whole industry actually being bigger than professional sport, right, in the US. But coming here and getting a chance to go to my mother-in-law lives up in Chapel Hill, UNC, like near UNC. I went
Yeah.
to like a UNC football game um in November, and like seeing the scale of like sport in every single, it's almost like imagine if every week there was like the Olympics, because it's like you've got like basketball, like the sort of the top sports for men's and women's like basketball, volleyball, football, and but then all of the tons of other sports, and it's like imagine if every single week in your like local town there's the Olympics. That's kind of what it feels like, because you could go like one day and watch the basketball team and sit in like a 30,000 seat stadium, and then go in
Yeah.
and watch the football team and it's like a 70,000, or even like
So
two three.
why can't the UK have that? Why can't college sports be big in Europe, let alone the UK?
Because we just don't have as much money as you guys, I guess. I actually uh, yeah, I don't know, it's just I don't know, like culturally, where did that come from? I actually don't really know where the whole college that whole college scene comes from, but I guess it's just
I mean, it largely college sports, the popularity of college football and to some extent college basketball as well, like preceded the major professional sports. Like
mm,
there was a big Harvard Yale games before the NFL existed when it came to American football, and Yale won the majority of those games. Go Yale. And so I'm not sure why the European universities can't have such a great sports system. I think to some extent it's not necessarily Title IX, but if you are a great young soccer player in the UK, you're not hoping to get a college scholarship necessarily. You are hoping to get picked up by the Manchester United Academy, I guess, and go that route more so.
yeah, it's I guess it's the club and professional academy system has like always been over and above, and I guess probably goes back down to the level of privatization of like the US collegiate system, right? Like, are traditionally UK universities were mostly public, and you didn't even pay attend like tuition fees. But from my understanding, it's tuition fees from in the US collegiate system have always, that's just been part of the financial model, right? It's been
Yeah.
privatized, so more like there's just always been a lot more.
I mean, it's certainly subsidized at public schools if you are like in state, but no, your point is certainly a big part of it. Of parents wanting to see their kid get a scholarship to play soccer in college or to play football in college, and now with NIL, now that you think about not just free college education, but you also think about like your NIL deals that they're going to help pay off our mortgage as well because my kid just plays college football or college basketball or something. So it's
Yeah, I mean, what if you were to put your kid through like a college sport? Like, I always wonder about this. Like, what's the sport where there's probably like the smallest talent pool, but the easiest route to getting your kid a scholarship, do you think?
Scholarship is hard to say. If you look up like the varsity blues controversy, you'll see like some of the ways
Yeah,
that people would use sports like yeah, like
I saw
rowing
that.
or
I watched that
sailing
documentary.
to get them into like elite institutions so they wouldn't otherwise be able to do that. That's more the other side where it's just helping you overcome your not as great academics and if your parents have a lot of money and can pay for it, that it matters. But in terms of getting a scholarship, then you're probably better off like trying to be like if you're instead of going for football, try to be really good at soccer, for example. But or baseball or softball, but those are fewer and further between. But we could do a whole episode on European versus non-European college athletics, let alone the college athletic system as a whole. This is really interesting stuff, and I guess there won't be a day anytime too soon where you guys have your own version of March Madness in the UK. Unfortunately, you guys are missing out.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you think I'm over here?
Exactly. Number two, tell me, you talked about working back at the television stations back in the day. So tell me your favorite story or show or anything that you got to work on back in your production days.
I actually worked on
Maybe
a
it's Love Island, but we'll see.
no, I'll go with one that's slightly more sporting and maybe relevant. I actually worked on a show and it was good fun. It's called The Jump. I don't know if they've done anything like this in America, but it was like the premise was they took eight celebrities uh, and basically taught them different winter sports. And then they had to, it's like Celebrity Olympics. They had to learn and compete in various different winter Olympic sports. And then each
Oh
week, one
wow.
person got like voted, or they lot a combination of a fan vote and a skill score. And they got voted out. So they were doing, they got taught to like ski jump. There was all this like crazy like really unsafe stuff that in hindsight I'm kind of surprised. I don't know how it got made, but I guess it's a sign of the times. But any like I ended up going and working in Austria for like 5 months on that show.
Wow.
And work like basically living in a ski resort, which was fun. But essentially it got discontinued because all the celebrities started suing Channel 4 and the production companies. So like Beth Twe Beth Twell, is it Beth Twell? Uh, Beth Tweddle, that's it. Who's like an Olympic gymnast. She like broke her vertebrae
Oh
on
gosh.
like a ski jump. And I remember like we were in this stuff canteen, you just hear like a chopper like land like next to the canteen. We're like, what? Oh no, something else has happened. And she
Wow.
got airlifted to hospital. So that was fun. But yeah, that was kind of probably one of my favorite jobs.
That
From
sounds
just,
incredible.
getting to live in a ski resort. That was fun.
That sounds awesome. I kind of I like we see hot ones now and like eating spicy foods is one thing, but to send them on a ski jump also like that would just be a whole other level of a celebrity activation, I guess. But that's really cool. It would crush on YouTube nowadays, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there's no such thing as but like most ideas are just rehashed. Like even you see a lot
Totally.
of these like, creator concepts and series. It's kind of just rehashes of TV formats, but for a new distribution and a new audience, right? Like
Totally.
there's no, I definitely see someone like a creator just basically stealing that format and doing Creator Olympics with maybe I should do that. That's a good idea.
Spot on. Number three for you, Joe. Tell me the coolest activation or innovative content that you've seen that you did not help advise or work on or put together. Just something that just stood out to you in the space, whether recently or all time.
Yeah, I do think the 3D. I mean, we talked about on the main show, but I do think that in terms of something that is proving out not beyond just activation, but like an actual digital product that's really advancing a whole new use case of a new emerging tech category, like 3D sports data. I think that direct to consumer creator fan tool that the BBC produced, which was done by immersive.io. So shout out to those guys. I think that's in terms of something that's like really impactful in the sports tech space. I think that's probably my favorite that's
Yeah.
been activated recently because I just think a lot of people were saying up until this point, I think a lot of people were saying like, does this matter? Like, why like are fans interested in this? I think it's kind of unequivocally proven that the numbers associated with that. I think it was 100. I think if I'm right, it was 100. From what I've seen, it's 100 million in the first week. It got 100 million hits to the tool or to the website, which is
That's
super
insane.
impressive. And then seeing beyond just that, I'd be interested to hear the different, dwell times and other interactivity data. But then obviously then seeing the proliferation of, micro creators, analysts, fans going and then posting their clips from that tool online and seeing that like spread like wildfire across social media, I think is just really helped prove out that this is a new media substrate, that is omni-channel that can exist as a new linear format in the form of outcasts. It can exist as highlights in the form of immersive clips, but then, even some of the work the media team did at City was using that data to create a new immersive ad spot for Etihad, a title partner, using their data to create a new immersive ad for that increased sponsorship revenue. So I think you're just seeing these omni-channel use cases and assets develop in real time. And I think the BBC clipping tool is just another really good use case of showing how that tech can be activated.
Yeah, no, it's always a good sign when something like feels like a platform, to use that catch-all term, when someone can build on top of it and can take something and make it their own, and it begins to, I mean, it grows exponentially, it snowballs like that. That is just so much more powerful than something that it's just like I one to many. I watched this thing and everyone else watched it, and then that's it, and that's the end of it. So I love that, and we could have a whole nother episode on just the branding and marketing of 3D in general. I think for people of a certain age like myself and older, like you think about 3D, you think about like the flimsy glasses and like weird and like and even like there was a 3D TV way back in the day, I think I want to say, and it just like was a complete failure. And so like even the term 3D means different things now, and so I think about that from a branding perspective as well. But no, the technology's been so cool to see what BBC did, and it's really cool to see how people are building on top of it as well. Number four for you, Joe. This can be you can go into your daily behavior if you want, or just kind of in general. Like, how do you kind of keep up with cutting edge technologies and fan behaviors? Like, what's like, are you trying to dip your toe into everything, or do you read certain newsletters? Are you watching shows? Like, how do you keep up with all this stuff?
Obviously, read your newsletter, Neil. Um, First and foremost. But I think so. Yeah, newsletter. Do like certain selected newsletters. I've tried to built myself a bit of a briefing with Claude. Built like a briefing like memo and note that pulls in kind of my favorite newsletter and
Yeah,
sources, daily brief to me via email, which I'm finding really
I do the same.
really useful just because there's so many sources now. I really like there's a new podcast I've started listening to specifically more on kind of AI, Gen AI and AI use cases. They're called AI Daily Brief. So I listen and it's pure, all really interesting like case studies, like news, and it's every day. So like because it's how fast AI is changing, I do think I really like that because it really just helps like keep on top of like current use cases, like um where people are finding value. So I think yeah, across podcast, newsletters, events as well. I do like getting into in-person events as well.
Yeah.
So probably those are main ways. And then doom scrolling LinkedIn, obviously, as well as yeah, posting myself.
Oh yeah, no, it's a lot to keep up with, and I'm with you too on trying to have Claude to some extent, pull in some of the trending stories and new things. Like it's certainly cool, and there's no shortage of resources out there. And but it's a lot to keep up with, and it's ever changing. So it's an exciting time to always be seeing what's going to emerge today, what's going to emerge tomorrow. It's awesome, and paying attention to the big events as well when there's like a big tentpole event, and how there's new things that are emerging in those spaces also. So yeah. Number five, I want to hear. Obviously, being a Hawkeye, we talked about them activating in tennis. We talked about the Australian Open a little bit and being down there. So tell me the most memorable tennis match that you've been at in person.
Oh wow. I think seeing Federer Nadal at Wimbledon in, I think I'm going to say it's 2021. I think it was his last run to the final where he played Djokovic, but he beat Nadal in the semis to get there. And that was the first time I've ever seen them play live. And probably I
Wow.
think that was the last time they would have played as well. I think it played head to head. So that was just like an amazing experience. I was in we technically weren't allowed to just go and sit in center court in the stands. Most other tournaments you can just get in and use your credential and just go if there's a spare seat, but Wimbledon are like particularly strict on that. Um, so there was like a couple of us who used to, but the Hawkeye booths where you'd sit with the official, where the officiating team would sit with an official for the line calling, that was courtside, and you had a good view. So then me
Wow.
and like Andy, like, snuck off to the booth, even though we weren't working
Yeah.
on the court, and just snuck off, and we were watching with like a small group of other people. And everyone was like, even the official was like, screw it, like it was, yeah, people were just going crazy.
That is
Um,
awesome.
so that was really cool. It definitely sticks out.
So I have to know the strawberries and cream, overrated, properly rated, underrated.
I mean, properly rated, but maybe overpriced, some would say. I
Okay.
think, I'm not sure the inflation index now is, but was it like, I think it was running at 10 pounds per like small little punnet when I was there. It
That's
might
insane.
even be more, but
That's
I
too
don't
expensive.
actually, I haven't been in a couple of years, so I need to double check. But yeah, British strawberries are good. I would say that for our cuisine.
Number six, Joe, tell me I always like to hear this from people who are running their own things, running their own consultancies, running their own business. Tell me the biggest lesson you've learned in running Future Sport Co.
I mean, it's still very early days. So yeah, only sprung up um, in the last few months, but and building on a lot of the consultancy work I was doing before City. But I do think it's that you've got to really put it. One, it's really hard to like do your own thing is hard. But it's equally it's super rewarding. The ability to like work directly with a number of different clients across different problems problems and statements. But I do think it's um, the one piece of thing I've learned is just you've really got from a kind of business development point of view, it's you've got to kiss a lot of frogs. Like, and this applies to, if you're doing business development or partnerships or whatever, like that you've got to assume that eight people, you know, 9 people out of 10 people you're chatting to, whether that's from a startup that you're looking to work to or work with, or a legal team you're looking to sell in, you've got to assume that only 1 out of 10 conversations is going to lead to actually a productive conversation around a partnership or deal, right? And like,
Yeah,
you just got to have a sheer amount of like resilience and a positive attitude, but also do things to increase your like surface area and luck. Like I don't think
yeah,
without the stuff I've been doing across content, social media the last 5 years, I don't think I'd be in a position to do what I'm doing now in terms of um, the inbound I'm getting from startups and the awareness around the projects I've done and the people I work with without having that kind of media channel and content. So I do think the biggest learning I do think, and you're seeing it across almost every business now, is that media is no longer like a nice to have. Every company almost has to be front loaded with the media and content funnel to be able to operate, because you need to be able to differentiate. You need to be able to like show up where your consumers are. I think you're seeing that with
yeah,
like even in venture capital, right? Like A116Z is like a huge example of like how it's actually a media business. Well, it's a venture business, but the media business is probably as important in terms of weighting as any other part of the business, right? Because that's how they differentiate. That's how they get awareness from um, around, to compete with other VCs for best in class startups,
Right.
but also how people are become aware of their brands. So like,
Yeah.
I think it's the me how important like media and content is to like my business, but a lot of businesses.
Yeah, I mean, just ask OpenAI, who paid however much they paid, $100 million for TVPN. So they definitely
Yeah,
understand the importance of having a media arm to any business, and
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
$1 billion business like them. I'm really curious to how you answer this one. Tell me the sport whose stock you most want to buy today. Like, what's a stock or what's a sport who's like has a lot of unrealized upside that you're gonna buy now because it's gonna increase a lot in the in not necessarily in the near future, but in the future in general.
I would say maybe US probably US volleyball, women's volleyball. I do think it's been interesting coming over to the States, seeing like the grassroots passion and interest. Like my wife's cousin, they're like obsessed. The girls are obsessed with volleyball. They actually engage with like the
Yeah,
League One grassroots like club. They go to that. And I think if you look at all the leading, even on Roblox, I think one of the most popular games
yeah,
that's not a licensed to a league, but one of the most popular organic games is a volleyball game.
right.
And I think that's really interesting, like leading indicator of like current fandom, sports fandom and participation, right? So I think volleyball, but I do kind of go back to tennis because I think, you see that stat around tennis is the most globally followed, like third most globally followed sport
Hmm.
from a viewership engagement metrics, but it's like the eighth or tenth most commercialized in terms of like commercial revenue. And I do think a large part down to um, I think the lack of people following beyond
The
the
Grand
Grand
Slams.
Slams and the
Yeah,
lack of people really understanding like the season long storytelling and like developing like the brands of athletes and I think fragmented like stakeholders involved as well. Like I do think if they can sort out the governance part of it and have like a more unified approach to the sport, um, I do think that'd be best. That'd be like great for the commercial side of sport. So I think I'd put if they can sort that out, then I think they'll only grow because I think the advantage tennis has over a lot of other sports is that it's pretty much the only one global sport where men and women are competing at the same sport
right.
in the same tournaments at the same time. But the biggest challenge is you still have the WTA women's governing body and the ATP, which are essentially kind of they're working together, but they're slightly
Yeah.
the interests aren't directly
They
aligned. But I
flirted
think
for years with merging. It seems like they've been flirting for years about that, but it's never really come together.
so, I think if that does they do end up sorting out the governance on that side, I do think the growth potential of tennis is huge from a commercial standpoint. So yeah, I reckon volleyball and tennis I'd buy.
Some good call outs there for sure. Volleyball is very much growing in the space, and to echo an earlier conversation, college volleyball in particular is huge. College and women's volleyball, especially, and yeah, tennis continues. Like we saw the Wimbledon U.S. TV ratings come out recently, and the women's final, despite having just two Czech players and no like quote unquote big names, somehow increased 48% year over year, which is just mad.
Oh wow, I didn't see
Very
that. That's
very cool to see.
very interesting.
Yeah. Number eight for you, Joe. I always we always ask our food questions. It's time for our food question. So tell me the best meal to get down there in Central Florida, in the greater Tampa area, and where to get it. And also, if you miss any meal from the UK the most, what's that meal from the UK that you miss the most?
Well, great.
I know England doesn't have the best reputation for food. Maybe there's something out there that you miss. So best meal to get in the greater Tampa area, and the meal from the UK you miss the most.
I think I'm enjoying so here back home we'd have like a BLT, like bacon, lettuce, tomato sandwich, call it BLT. That's like a very classic British sandwich. Here they'd have like a GLT, which is like grouper lettuce tomato. It's like grouper being like a very common fish caught over here on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
It's super meaty, it's super tasty. So I'm really loving like grouper sandwiches is like my go-to when I'm out. I have that or like a grouper burger. So yeah, enjoying that. What I miss from home, food wise, yeah, I'd like it. Do you think English breakfast is like an unbelievable dish? Like, have you had an English breakfast with
I had
sausage, egg, bacon, tomato, hash
not sure if it's been a
browns,
proper one,
black
but
pudding?
I spent some time in Scotland and had and England as well. And had some I think traditional English breakfast at one point.
Yeah, or Scottish. It'll probably have some Scottish variation like haggis. Like Ireland have an Irish breakfast, which is a slightly different variation. I do think that is a great that is a great dish and a thing you don't really get. Obviously, you have you're an American like an American breakfast, but I think I do really like an English breakfast and a grease. Have you heard of a greasy spoon? It's like it's like the equivalent of like a waffle. It'd be like your version of like a Waffle House, but it's not necessarily a chain. It's just like every town or village in the UK would have like a calf, and it's a place that only serves English breakfast and breakfast type foods.
Nice.
It's like a bodega. It's like a bodega bench basically, but it only serves breakfast, like English breakfasts and like breakfast sandwiches. That's a uniquely like British thing that I think is good. I really enjoy that, and it's super cheap. It's like £6 for breakfast.
Hell
So
yeah.
yeah,
It makes me think too of there when England and Mexico played in the World Cup. There was the bus meme going around where like one side of the bus is the guy's happy, and the other side of the bus the guy's sad, and it was like the Mexico side was like we the happy side was we eat beans with every meal, and the guy was really happy, and the England side was we eat beans with every meal, and it was really sad. It was just a really funny meme. I used that meme before the England versus Mexico game, but no, English breakfast definitely signs off, and GLT sounds quite interesting, so I might just check that out next time I'm in Florida. Number nine for you, Joe. Coming down the wire here with Joe Farren of Future Sport Co. Tell me your favorite, like, kind of guiding principle or mantra when it comes to devising innovative content or production elements. So, like, what's sort of something that is just like not necessarily a personal tagline, but what's like something that's top of mind when you're devising these innovative activations for fans?
um, it almost comes down to um why, like what's the why behind why you're doing something. Like I'm really interrogating that before you go ahead and do something. You see sometimes the use of like emerging tech or creative tech, and it's like you're just doing that just for the sake, almost like for a press release,
Right.
or doing it for uh, doing it just to say you're using like emerging tech. Like I hate to like show on other people's work, but like there's that Mourinho AI Gen AI activation with Coke, and it was like Mourinho's speaking is having
Yeah, I
Mourinho
love
having
that.
a debate about football with another Mourinho. That's his like digital twin, and I'm just like. First of all, I don't even think you could just do that without like Gen AI. I think you just use that like using traditional like video production like techniques, right?
Yeah.
Like, so why are you doing that? And I think it also comes down to like the mantra of like, just because you could doesn't mean you should.
Right, totally. That's what I was thinking too.
Uh,
The Jurassic Park line of like, we can, but should we, or whatever.
and I will say that's not my own. That's one of my old bosses at City. Came up with that when I was like chatting about some of these yeah questionable activations with him. But I did that one's like, okay, I think I'm gonna borrow that. So I'll have to shout him out for that. But I do think it's a really good mantra of like sense checking yourself with these like emerging tech
Yeah.
activations or products is like, okay, well, like why are we doing this? Like what is the new, you know, unlock or what are we trying to learn from this that we don't really know about our fan base? Or like we go
Yeah.
back to the stuff we talked about around fan behaviors, like what new way are we opening up our brand um, to a fan that's really tapping into pre-existing behavior that we know is there?
Love it. No, spot on. And like one of my favorite like personal mantras almost is like with any big decision or any sort of direction, is ask why like 5 times, and once you answer those 5 whys or 3 whys, however many questions times you want to ask why, you'll get to the bottom of like what are we actually doing here, and it doesn't matter. And that's a great way to think about things.
Ask why 5 times, is it? That's a good one. I'll have to steal that for my next podcast.
I love it. Our last one for you, Joe. Get you out of here. Tell me the sports team that you'd be most excited to win a championship. So, I guess it's too late for England in the World Cup now. But like, who's that club? Maybe it's a Premier League club. Maybe becoming a big NFL fan. Like, which team has your heart the most? You'd be most excited to see win their sports ultimate trophy or championship.
I think so. I mean, I've been a long-suffering Man United fan now since I was a kid, and it was a good first what 18 years, but the
Yeah, good
last
childhood.
last 15 haven't been so good. But I do think since coming to the States, something I've like thought of like an amazing bucket list sports experience I'd love to have is being in the town or city where like a team wins a major championship. Like it would have been amazing to have been in Tampa here, like when they won the Super Bowl with Brady. Like that must
Yeah,
have been insane. Or like you're seeing all the clips of the Knicks, like how crazy New York was, like the night the Knicks won the championship. Like I feel like that is like a very core US sporting experience that like I mean, of course you'd get it in like Argentina when, Buenos Aires when Argentina won the World Cup
right.
or whatever. But like be that I think that's like a core like bucket list thing to so I'm not it doesn't really necessarily matter on the team, but like being in that city, would be awesome. So like fingers crossed that, the Bucks bring it home with like Baker this year because I think that would be cool.
There we go. No, it's such a like that's one thing that I don't like about Premier League is it's oftentimes like because there's no playoff system. The Champions League is ultimately like, the more playoffy type thing. There's no, it's kind of anticlimactic. I'm an Arsenal supporter, and like the big moment was not involving Arsenal. It was when City drew with Brentford, or I forget who it was, or they lost, and it was like so I like that aspect of U.S. sports. You have that championship game. You know that at the end of this game there, we could win it all, and I like that aspect every year. So I think that helps
Yeah,
with.
well, it was just like wasn't it just the night that Arsenal won? It was just the Arsenal players going, the Arsenal players just going out on their own, what they like celebrating around the stadium on their own. Like when I think the day that they won it, because obviously City lost it, they just
Yeah,
went out on the streets on their own. It was just them. And it's like, if that had been America, the whole street, like the city or whatever, the whole streets would have been like flooded with like people. But I mean, I guess obviously it's like London where there's 8 other teams as well, right? But
true.
it's kind of funny that you point that out because it's like it's just the Arsenal players just going and partying on their own, like versus like the streets filled with people.
Well, hopefully you'll get to experience a city going crazy because a team won. You'll have a chance at some point, whether it's the Bucks or the Lightning, or you can go up to Chapel Hill if UNC ever wins again in basketball. So you'll have a chance. All right, Joe, you crushed your set pieces, scored a lot of goals, a lot of aces. If we want to play a little bit of tennis as well, now's your chance to take over the podcast room and tell us your all-star follow. It can be a podcast, a newsletter, a Twitter follow, Instagram follow, someone on LinkedIn. Just tell us what or who they are and why they're worth following.
Um, First of all, I don't know if we're gonna have time for a plug, but go and follow me.
Definitely no. That
And
was coming
Farren.
next.
Oh, there you go. Okay. We'll get to that next then. You can cut that bit out. Someone who I would follow, I would say this guy. I honestly think this guy. Let me try and find him. His name is so the AI Daily Brief that I referenced, which is written. So it's a daily podcast and a newsletter by a guy called Nathaniel Whitmore, who is I think is probably one of the best like pieces of media that I'm following at the moment on AI that just helps you keep up on everything going on in AI, and it's just all complete like signal, no like no bullshit, like no noise. It's just
Yeah.
like all so much value out of like a 20-minute podcast a day. So I say go and follow him. Don't know him directly, but I think he's very smart and like the content's really good.
Nice, good shout there, and we'll link them up in the show snippets and notes. And then yes, Joe, where can we find you? The newsletter, Future Sport. Tell us everywhere we can find your work and your insight.
Cool, yeah, go. So publish a decent amount of content every day on LinkedIn on sports tech and innovation. So Joe Farren on LinkedIn, and then also go and find me on Substack on Future Sport Feed, or if you just type in Future Sport Substack into Google, it should come up. And yeah, publish a weekly newsletter breaking down the innovation and tech behind the biggest sports teams, leagues, and news every week, with my own kind of operator lens and insight. So trying to, I guess not, it's not just a news feed, it's kind of really sharing in kind of strategies I've implemented over the years and really breaking it down, different news stories down from a builder's perspective, not just linking in news purely. So yeah, go and give me a follow.
Hell yeah, check him out. As you guys heard today, or watched or listened, he knows what he's talking about. A lot of great knowledge, a lot of great insight. And if you're a startup looking to get into the market, hit him up. If you're a team or a league or media outlet or whoever looking to drive innovation and new ideas and new go-to-market strategies, hit him up as well. And Joe, cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast today and sharing us your insight, your wisdom, your knowledge. Just so much fun talking about stuff with you, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Neil. Been an absolute pleasure.
Just phenomenal being able to chat with Joe Farren. Just come on Wing A, just so enlightened and great to hear his thoughts and ideas about what's happening with fan behaviors and different platforms, different technologies, and what we can really make of all this collection of fan data, all this time that fans are spending, in and around sports, and how we can really, make greater experiences, drive new revenue streams, which is very much needed now, and really adapt to, the shifting fan behavior paradigms that are prevailing in sports, but also beyond sports as well. But that'll do for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again to Joe Farren. Thanks again to you for downloading and listening or consuming this podcast, however you do so. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. Hit me up on Twitter and J287, also on LinkedIn, the website, dsmsports.net, and subscribe, follow, check out the podcast and preferred podcast platform. Until next time, this is Neil Horowitz signing off, the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.